The river swallowed a dead body and a secret that took 30 years to surface. On March 14, 1990, in Dale County, Alabama, a fisherman spotted something floating near the bank. Authorities arrived quickly. They pulled a young woman's body from the water. She was 22 years old. Her name was Tracey Harris. The autopsy soon confirmed the worst. Tracey had been strangled before entering the river. Drowning was the final cause, but the marks on her neck left no doubt. This was murder. The call that brought police to that quiet riverbank opened a case that would remain unsolved for 3 decades, with suspicion falling on the wrong man, until one long-buried secret surfaced and shocked everyone. Tracey Harris was a gentle, hard-working 22-year-old mother living in Ozark, Alabama. Friends remembered her as kind, shy, and deeply devoted to her young daughter. She had recently finalized a divorce from Carl Harris, but continued living in the same home to co-parent their child. Tracey worked steadily and dreamed of a peaceful new beginning away from the tension that had marked her marriage. On the evening of March 7, 1990, just one day after her 22nd birthday, Tracey left for what seemed like a routine day. She never returned. Carl reported her missing the next morning, saying she had not come home. The search began immediately. Friends and family joined police in combing the area. Flyers were posted, questions were asked, but no one could have predicted the horror waiting exactly 1 week later. Police mobilized right away. Then, on March 14th, the fisherman's grim discovery shifted everything to homicide. The autopsy showed strangulation marks alongside drowning. Investigators turned their attention to those closest to Tracey, and suspicion centered quickly on Carl Harris. Several compelling reasons made Carl the prime suspect from the start. He was the last person known to have seen Tracey alive. They still lived in the same house despite the divorce. Multiple witnesses, including friends and family, described Carl's controlling and abusive behavior toward Tracey in the months leading up to her disappearance. Dawn Beasley, who had lived with the couple for about a month, witnessed Carl physically and mentally abusing Tracey firsthand. In one incident, she saw Carl grab Tracey by the throat, bend her backward, and threaten to kill her in front of multiple people. Other witnesses reported overhearing violent arguments and explicit death threats from Carl toward Tracey. Carl's account of the night she vanished shifted in small but troubling ways, details that didn't quite line up under repeated questioning. The home was searched. Investigators found small signs of disturbance and inconsistencies in Carl's timeline and explanations, yet the evidence remained largely circumstantial. No murder weapon, no eyewitness to the killing itself, no direct physical link placing Carl at the river that night. In 1990, forensic technology was far more limited than today. No advanced DNA testing on trace evidence, no rapid genetic genealogy, no widespread CCTV or cell phone data. The killer had left almost no trail that 1990s methods could follow. Without a confession or undeniable proof, prosecutors could not build a case strong enough for charges. The investigation gradually cooled. Tracey's daughter grew up without answers, raised by grandparents, while the real perpetrator remained free for decades. For more than 26 years, the file sat dormant. Tracey's family never stopped asking questions. Her daughter grew up wondering who had taken her mother. The community quietly assumed Carl was guilty, but no new leads surfaced. Then, in September 2016, the case was quietly reopened. Several factors contributed to the revival. Cold case units across the country were gaining new momentum thanks to breakthroughs in forensic science, especially investigative genetic genealogy and vastly improved DNA analysis techniques that could now extract usable profiles from old, degraded evidence. Fresh interviews with witnesses who had been reluctant or fearful in 1990 began to surface. Pressure from Tracey's family, advocacy groups for unsolved murders, and renewed media interest in long cold cases also played a role. Prosecutors believed the combination of old evidence and new investigative tools gave them enough to move forward. They built a case strong enough to charge Carl Harris with murder. Carl was arrested in South Carolina, where he had moved years earlier, and extradited back to Alabama. The community, long convinced of his guilt, prepared for trial in 2019. Relief seemed near after so many years of unanswered questions. Carl maintained his innocence, but the evidence pointed heavily in one direction. The courtroom stood ready. Then, just days before opening statements, a single phone call upended everything. A witness who had remained silent since 1990 came forward. Dawn Beasley, a former friend of the couple, revealed she had kept a devastating secret. Her ex-husband, Jeff Beasley, an acquaintance who had briefly lived with Tracey and Carl, had confessed to her the night Tracey vanished. Beasley told Dawn he went to the house to speak with Tracey while Carl was away. He wanted her to divorce Carl and start a new life with him, believing she deserved better and that he could offer her that fresh start. Tracey became angry at the suggestion and refused. They argued, and the fight turned physical. Beasley claimed he accidentally hurt her during the struggle, leading to her death by drowning in the river. Dawn had stayed silent for nearly 30 years out of fear. Jeff had threatened her life if she ever spoke up. She feared retaliation, believed he was capable of violence, and wanted to protect her own family and stability. She married Jeff, had children with him, and built a life, always carrying the weight of the secret. When prosecutors first contacted Dawn in 2019 to testify against Carl, she refused, saying they were ruining her life, and she was too busy and stressed. But when pressed with the reality of an innocent man on trial, her conscience could no longer bear it. She finally revealed the most important reason she couldn't testify. They had the wrong person. Under questioning, Jeff Beasley confessed fully, providing details only the killer would know. The details aligned with evidence that had puzzled investigators for decades. Charges against Carl Harris were dropped immediately on his 55th birthday. He walked free after years under suspicion. Jeff Beasley was convicted of murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison. He had a prior criminal record, including a burglary conviction, yet he had escaped suspicion for 3 decades. Authorities never publicly detailed a deeper motive beyond the argument over Tracey refusing to leave Carl. The case closed not with dramatic new forensics, but with one person finally breaking a silence that had lasted 3 decades. Tracey Harris never saw her daughter grow up. The river that claimed her body held its secret for 30 years, until one reluctant truth set it free.